Thank you so much, Lynn, and thanks to the organizers, BID, of course, for the invitation. It has been really great listening to all the other panelists, and I thank them for their interventions. If anyone was expecting the last speaker is going to add any optimism, I hate to disappoint. I will be continuing the trajectory of the slightly pessimistic take, although Ambassador Durrani did try to uh, add a semblance of positivity. But there are 2 points or two sort of ways that I would like to take my intervention in. The first is, of course, a very quick run through on India's outreach to the Taliban. Considering interim Foreign Minister Muttaqi was there recently, and the Taliban Industries Minister is in India right now, till Monday, I think. Um, when I think if you see sort of India's outlook towards the Taliban, it has been on two sort of core fronts. Initially, or since 2021 to 2020, about 2023, I think it was pretty much embroiled in confusion from a domestic politics point of view, from a regional politics point of view, and from an international diplomacy point of view. But also the concern was bound to meet pragmatism at some point. And that is largely because it's a symptom of geography. Afghanistan is a neighbor, and what has happened there impacts us directly or indirectly, both from a security point of view, from an economic point of view, and from, of course, a sort of regional construct point of view. Uh, I think India was one of the last countries in the region to really start engaging the Taliban in a very overt manner. Not be going beyond the technical offices and whatever a technical office is. No one has really answered me ever what a technical office is. But starting to engage with the Taliban because it's a reality, as one of the speakers said earlier, it's something that you can't ignore. And I think one of the things that doesn't get talked about these days when it comes to outreach to Taliban, I agree that there needs to be more discussion about just the impact that a US Taliban deal had at that point of time. I think it really left a lot of countries in the region in a lurch, considering there was very minimal um, uh, talk between a lot of the regional actors and the US specifically when it came to that kind of deal being signed and what impact it is going to have. And After, of course, it was signed, from even the Indian foreign minister at some point said, well, we were not expecting the US to be there forever. But I think the way that the exit took place, the chaos that happened, the images of people hanging on C-17 jets as they were taking off from Kabul, uh, uh, impacted from, or at least change Indian perception that I think a lot more leverage needs to be built up in the region by itself. Instead of expecting a country like the US, which has been embroiled in Afghanistan for 2 decades, to do something about it. Now we have understood the US has left. As I think Dr. Schindler was alluding to earlier, even raising Afghanistan as an issue today, there's almost sort of you can see people leaving the room very quickly because they don't want to engage. I think more than engagement, they don't want to accept that it was such a monumental failure on the Western power part. And it's not just Afghanistan. I think if you start counting, we can of course talk about Africa and sort of other countries where space has been ceded. But from an Indian point of view, I think there were 70 countries that really started dialogue of some sort with the Taliban before India really got involved and started doing it in a much more official manner rather than background manner. And of course, as I said, we even if you see our engagement with the Taliban when Muttaqi came here, he was here for almost a week. The statement that came out from the official statement that came out, of course, it reiterated one of India's core concerns is that security is an absolute critical issue. And that has been sort of the Taliban line that we will never allow our lands to be used against any other country. I don't think that's holding up very well for a lot of the neighborhood. But beyond that, if you see from an Indian perspective, the largely all statements, including the ones that have been released over the past 24 hours with the industries ministry here, has been largely economic, and has largely have largely been about engaging the Taliban, sorry, the Afghan population. And we go back to basically the 90s, right? Even then, India had some sort of engagement with the Taliban, not as overt as we are seeing today, but almost everyone is doing that at this point of time. But having that engagement with the Afghan people has been a very critical part of India's outreach, sort of reaching out to absolutely the base level, whether it's through educational scholarship, whether it's through medical help, and so on and so forth. Building that capacity with the Afghan population has been critical. And not losing that is also equally critical. So that because if we go back to 2021, India also sort of shut down visas for Afghans because they were not sure who's going to show up at the doors. And rebuilding that capacity was absolutely important from an Indian point of view. So India was never going to be out beyond a point. India was always going to have that sort of rekindle that outreach once it assessed what exactly is going to take place as far as the Taliban is concerned, and what kind of political constitution that it will try to develop. Again, going back, I don't think it has developed really any kind of political blueprint or constitution, let alone an economic one. It's sort of a grab of positions in power at this point of time. We often sort of see friction coming up between what Kandahar is saying or what Kabul is saying. During a lot of, for example, skirmishes that happened between the Taliban and Pakistan, we really didn't hear from Sirajuddin Haqqani all that much, at least on public platforms, which was very interesting dynamic for me personally to follow. But yes, it did. India was already, in a mobile situation on how to deal with the Taliban. But India's critical problem about dealing with the Taliban is how do you market it domestically? How do you market it in a country that has suffered from terrorism for such a long period of time that you are now suddenly engaging with the Taliban? And so that was a primary reason why we saw such a long wait between 2021 and 2025 before that kind of engagement really fructified. So just broadly, very quickly, that is, I think, some of the Indian thinking. And let me just segue from that a little bit to one critical point that I think gets missed out on a lot of times when we're talking Afghanistan. There is no regional consensus on the Taliban. There is no overlap of a common security threat. There is no overlap of ideation of how to deal with the Taliban. Earlier, of course, when certain countries were supporting the Northern Alliance, there was a group that had some sort of design on what to do and what not to do at that point. But right now, everyone from Central Asia to Iran to India to Pakistan, they all have very individualistic viewpoints on how to deal with the Taliban. And I think that gives the Taliban an opportunity to play the region according to what the whims and fancies that they would like to play to. Sort of picking out all these discrepancies in geopolitics and all these discrepancies in security requirements, and try to act on it from their own interest perspective and what they require from a lot of these countries. So the fact that earlier everyone was very uh, comfortable, for lack of a better term, when the US and NATO security umbrella was there, because they didn't have to fight. They could do everything else that was required, whether that's any kind of diplomacy that they were interested in. But their security was sort of taken care of. It was guaranteed in a certain way. But now, of course, with that cover gone, everyone has to sort of reach out to the Taliban according to their own views, and what they want out of the Taliban. And no regional country, as far as I see it, has has these sort of that Venn diagram of security even doesn't come together. There are no common fields in the center for most of the regional countries, even when it comes to terrorism, unfortunately, or even when it comes to extremism. So I think unfortunately, going forward, South Asia specifically will see a rise in hostilities, for lack of better term, again, when it comes to these kind of groups being a bit more activated. a bit more emboldened because there are more political vacuums, because there are more security vacuums going forward. We've seen, for example, we've seen proliferation of U.S. and NATO-made weapons into Kashmir in hand of terrorist organizations. So there are these sort of real security ideas and requirements that have been placed in front of the Taliban. And of course, the Taliban says that yes, we are going to handle this, or we're going to handle that, and really nothing really there's no way to get a guarantee from them that has this been handled or has this not been handled, and so on and so forth. We are not talking in Kabul to a rational actor. Just because they're in a position of power right now does not make them into a rational entity, does not make them into an entity that has experience in A, governance, of course, but also B, in providing security, considering they were fighting security most of their lives. Now, suddenly, when you have to provide security, it's a whole different ballgame that may require you to imprison your fellow fighters at some level if the requirement if the push comes from country A or country B, whether they're Al Qaeda. There's a lot of Al Qaeda is very active in Afghanistan, for example. But of course, the Taliban will never give up. If the Taliban was open to taking bombs for 20 years and not give up Osama bin Laden, this is not really the time where the Taliban is giving up anything when it comes to security guarantees. So I think, adding to the pessimism train, I think unfortunately over the next 3, 4, or 5 years, with some of the murmurs that you hear from Afghanistan every now and then within the Taliban specifically, we are going to see a time of upheaval coming out of Afghanistan, because I don't think the Taliban will be able to um, hold the sort of hold those post 2021 quote unquote peace that they have been marketing around the world, and that is a real threat for across the region. From ranging from Central Asia, India, Pakistan, Iran, everyone, and the only way to sort of try and discuss that before that eventuality takes place is for a regional forum to be there where all these countries can sit around and have that discussion. But unfortunately, as I mentioned before, geopolitics has different ideals and ideas at this point of time. Iran has different requirements out of the Taliban to make sure the US never returns, the West never returns in this part of the world. Central Asia decided, you know what, we'll just talk economics with them. We are not to make sure that the borders are secure. Pakistan has the Durand Line issue and multiple issues now that have come out from the Taliban fold. So yeah, in the next, I think, half a decade, we are going to see an upheaval coming out of Afghanistan. And as just final point, as Dr. Schindler said, I think it was Dr. Schindler, he said that until something happens eventually somewhere at scale, and the eyes will come back. The problem hasn't gone away, but other countries that were dealing with the problem are fatigued, and they don't have the capacities and political will at this point of time, from the public perception to the government perception, to look at Afghanistan once again. So right now, it's up to the region to see what kind of security and political threats are coming. All the regional countries will handle it individually. They will not handle it as a collective. That gives the Taliban ample space to basically thrive and do what they want to do. I'll just stop there. I'm happy to take questions.
Well, thank you very much for your comments, Kabir. Given what you mentioned as New Delhi's security concerns and its limited but ongoing diplomatic engagement, um, do you think that India's desire to have some sort of diplomatic softening with the Taliban has come too late for New Delhi to be able to have any meaningful influence on what you've described as an erratic and irrational, and we've heard it from other participants as well, player?
No, Lynn, look, India's concern, look, I don't think there is anyone is under any illusion that the Taliban is going to deliver big on anything. That includes security guarantees or any kind of security guarantees that they talk about. I don't think beyond a point they have full control where they can say, yes, entity A, B, and C is not going to target India. I don't think they are in that position to follow up on that. But also, like I said, from an Indian point of view, it's equally challenging on how do the people here perceive the Taliban, or sort of the normalization with the Taliban. When Interim Minister Mutaki was here, there was a huge hue and cry when he did a press conference here and did not allow women journalists to go in. And that, that sort of that entire fracas, which then they tried to backtrack on in a very flimsy way, became the headline for the day. And that pressure does not go to the
Mm.
Taliban. The Taliban doesn't care
Yeah.
on that front. That pressure comes back home to
Mm.
domestic politics.
Mm.
But from an Indian point of view, I think it was hosting the Taliban here, because it's not just about the press conference that was allowed. Interim Minister Muttaqi also went to Deoband
Mm.
seminary, where he was
Indeed.
sort of welcomed by
Mobbed.
this huge crowd. Exactly.
Yep.
But having very quickly said that, Deoband seminary has also been that place where the leaders of that seminary have actually said in the past, especially after 2021, that yes, they don't really condone the Americans leaving in any shape or form, but they want the Taliban to be inclusive. They want the Taliban to allow schools to open. So that kind of messaging from the Deoband seminary is important. It's a very important point that the Indians tried to mobilize during his visit as well. So he was sent there. Yes, you saw the mob, but I would be very, very surprised if all the messages that were delivered to him inside rooms were not completely ingratiating the Taliban's quote unquote victory in 2021. But I think there was a lot of realistic messaging saying that, if you don't do X, Y, Z, A, B, and C over the coming time, uh,
Mm.
your power hold is not going to be a long-term one.
Mm. Good. Well, thank you for your comments.